Well, hello there. Today I'd like to tell you a story of true friendship and loyalty in old San Francisco. It's the tale of Bummer and Lazarus. It all started on a cold January day in 1861 on Montgomery Street in downtown San Francisco. There was a vicious fight between two unevenly matched dogs. A crowd of people stood by enjoying the fracas. The larger animal bit the smaller one's leg, almost severing it. Nearby there was another dog, Bummer. He was already famous as a champion rat catcher. When he heard the snarling and barking, he came to investigate. He promptly dashed into the fray to rescue the injured creature. The bully ran off yelping, and Bummer escorted the poor wounded animal to a safe doorway. The two slept there every night until the injured leg healed. From this incident evolved a friendship which was to last as long as the two dogs lived. This friendship became part of the history of San Francisco. For several days, Bummer made his usual rounds of the restaurants and saloons along Montgomery Street, begging food from the customers who knew him well. But instead of eating it there, he carried the food to where his friend lay to share it with him. Eventually, the other dog regained his health. He was now called Lazarus by the good citizens of San Francisco, and he accompanied Bummer on his rounds, and the two became inseparable. The origins of the two stalwart companions are uncertain. One report said Bummer was born on the western prairies, fought Indians on his way to California, lost his master, he became demoralized, and spent a short time in Sacramento before making his way to San Francisco. Even less is known about Lazarus. He was probably one of the oldest dogs in town and yellowish-black in color. Neither was said to be attractive. In fact, newspapers delighted in saying how ugly they were. Bummer had an overshot lower jaw with protruding teeth, giving him a fiendish grin. The two redeeming qualities was their bond of friendship and their expertise in killing rats. The city was infested with rats. The San Francisco Bulletin of October 3, 1863, reported that when greengrocers Gould and Martin cleared out a cellar on their premises, the two dogs killed over 400 rats during the process. At another place of business, when an effort was made to get rid of rats, Bummer and Lazarus killed 85 of the vermin in about 20 minutes. However, not only was the city infested with rats, it was also infested with stray dogs. The Daily Alta California said in an article on April 21st, 1860, titled "The Dog Nuisance, Strychnine Needed," the city is infected with thousands of worthless mangy curs, whose numbers have at last become intolerable. Only a decade earlier, citizens of this gold rush town had taken the law into their own hands, forming vigilance committees to judge and punish criminals. In a similar manner, people now began leaving poisoned food in the streets in an effort to get rid of stray dogs. But in spite of this ill will to strays, San Francisco still took two of these to their hearts, Bummer and Lazarus. The dog problem became intolerable. The city passed an ordinance in 1862 prohibiting dogs without muzzle or lead in the streets in downtown San Francisco. The dog catcher was ordered to round them up and take them to the dog pound. After a week, if it hadn't been redeemed for $5, the dog was to be executed. Police were authorized to shoot them on sight, and a 50-cent bounty was paid for any dog taken to the pound by the public. This reward encouraged small boys to take pets from the safety of their gardens and carry them off to the pound. But what of poor Bummer and Lazarus? They had no master to protect them from the grim provisions of the ordinance. For a while, it seemed as if they were immune. Then the unthinkable happened. An overzealous dog catcher picked up poor Lazarus and took him off to the pound. However, someone paid the $5 to release him, and within a few days, hundreds signed a petition calling on the city to exempt Bummer and Lazarus from the ordinance. The exemption was obtained on June 17, 1862, and the city rejoiced. The following week, the two showed their appreciation by chasing and stopping a runaway horse and cart on Clay Street. Bummer ran along one side of the street, while Lazarus ran along the other. At Kearny Street, Bummer ran in front of the horse and held it at bay until a man came up and caught the team. Lazarus was on hand to check any further advance. However, there were times when they were not so popular. In October 1862, they were locked overnight in the jewelry shop of Rosenfeld and Collins, probably to help rid premises of rats. So incensed were they at being denied their freedom that during the night they ran wild and smashed display cases, scattering contents all over the place. On another occasion, Lazarus was accidentally locked alone in the same shop. Trying to escape, he smashed his head against a thick plate glass window, cracked it in several places. He jumped onto the showcases, scattering the delicate contents everywhere. When Bummer arrived on the outside, he couldn't get in, and Lazarus could not get out, so the two settled for the night together, Lazarus in the window display and Bummer on the pavement outside. By now, they were well-known characters in San Francisco. On the evening of October 22nd, 1862, they appeared on stage at the Metropolitan Theater, playing themselves in a drama called Life in San Francisco. One day, someone made a tragic mistake. They gave Bummer to a farmer across the bay in Alameda, saying he would make an excellent sheepdog. However, Bummer immediately considered sheep as very large rats and set about attacking them before anyone realized what was happening. A number of myths and tall tales have arisen over the years about Bummer and Lazarus. One claims they belong to Joshua Norton, a local character who roamed the city from 1859 to 1880, claiming to be Emperor Norton I of the United States and protector of Mexico. However, no contemporary newspaper account was found connecting the dogs with him. The myth probably started by the famous cartoon drawn by Edward Jump called The Three Bummers. It shows Norton eating at the free lunch counter of one of the local saloons, while Bummer and Lazarus stand by hoping to share the meal. But the emperor was not amused when he saw the cartoon displayed in the window of a newsagent. He let fly at the window with his famous walking stick, but the glass was tough and he only succeeded in breaking his cane. Lazarus died in October 1863 after eating some poisoned food. It was suspected that the poisoner was the father of a boy who had accused the dog of biting him. A $50 reward was offered for the poisoner's identity. It was never claimed. Edward Jump produced another cartoon showing Lazarus' funeral procession. It shows a number of local politicians, businessmen, and other characters. It shows Emperor Norton conducting the last rites. A small boy swings a rat as if it were an incense burner, and another local character, George Washington II, digging the grave. Meanwhile, Bummer looks on mournfully. To the artist Jump, this cartoon was merely another satirical look at the times, but to future observers it became the basis of a myth that Lazarus had been buried and that hundreds or even thousands of people had attended his funeral. The story was even given credibility in the Guinness Book of Records as the most attended dog funeral on record. This entry has recently been removed. The truth is, however, Lazarus was not buried. His skin was removed and stuffed by a local taxidermist, then put on display in one of the many saloons along Montgomery and Clay Streets. Bummer lived on another 2 years. He was inconsolable following the loss of his friend. For the most part, he spent his last 2 years sad and lonely. Sometime in August 1865, a drunk kicked him down a flight of stairs. He was severely injured. His body began to swell. Although in great pain, he carried on making the rounds of saloons and restaurants. It seemed he was determined to fight death as resolutely as he had fought rats in his earlier years. On Sunday, October 8, 1865, San Francisco experienced its worst earthquake in living memory. Although nobody was killed, many buildings were damaged beyond repair. Edward Jump illustrated this event in his usual humorous style with a cartoon titled Earthquakey Times. In it you can see Bummer looking old and swollen and leaning to one side. Despite his courageous battle, his condition worsened. He was taken to a farm in the countryside, hoping he might recover, but he died within a few days. Tributes were published in all the local newspapers. Samuel Clemens eulogized, saying, "Bummer died full of years and honor, and disease and fleas." Nearly 100 saloons bid for his corpse, believing that having him stuffed and put on display would be worth thousands of dollars a year in trade. The owner of a saloon at the corner of Montgomery and Clay Streets was the successful bidder, and stuffed Bummer resided there many years. An equally stuffed Lazarus was on display at a nearby establishment. On February 2nd, 1906, the Daily Morning Call reported that Bummer and Lazarus had been donated to the California Historical Society's museum in Golden Gate Park. But before they could be put on display, the great San Francisco earthquake and fire came along in April 1906, and they were apparently destroyed. But not so. In April 1910, the San Francisco Chronicle reported the curator came across the stuffed bodies of Bummer and Lazarus in an old cupboard. They were never put on display, but in 1985, the director of the Historical Society came across a photograph of the stuffed pair in an old scrapbook. And here they are, looking a little worse for wear, Bummer clearly showing off his peculiar dentition. It's now 150 years since Bummer and Lazarus wandered the streets of San Francisco, yet their names are still recalled with fondness by San Franciscans. Their story is simple enough. Bummer and Lazarus were strays and acknowledged no master. They lived in the 1860s and gained the respect and attention of the people because of their expertise in killing rats and their unique bond of friendship.